Goodfellas is a classic gangster movie directed by Martin Scorsese based on the true story of mobster Henry Hill, telling the story of his rise through the ranks of the mafia alongside Jimmy Conway, played by Robert De Niro, and Tommy DeVito, played by Joe Pesci. The movie is known for its gritty realism, dynamic storytelling, and unforgettable performances, especially Joe Pesci's portrayal of the volatile and psychopathic Tommy, based on the real-life unstable gangster Tommy DeSimone, which won him an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. The film captures the allure, magical appeal, and eventual downfall of the mob life, with Scorsese's signature style, featuring long takes, fast editing, and a killer soundtrack. It's been a while since we last discussed Goodfellas on the channel, but we've got loads of videos dedicated to the film, like why wasn't Jimmy also killed for whacking Billy Batts? Was Jimmy really going to kill Karen? What happened to Henry Hill in real life after the movie ended? And a whole lot of other things. Check out the channel and subscribe while you do so. Today I wanted to take a closer look at the Billy Batts situation, whatever happened there, and who was at fault for a seemingly small series of acts of breaking balls, which eventually leads to the death of both people involved. Batts is of course released from prison after doing 6 years not a peep, and Tommy arrives to Henry's club where Billy's homecoming party is taking place. He calls Tommy over, Tommy delaying, as he's clearly agitated, saying he forgot he was coming back today. Billy greets Tommy in a very hands-on kind of way, and you can see that Tommy is getting frustrated, and he then tells Billy not to bust his balls, leading Billy to twist the knife against an already uncomfortable Tommy by going down memory lane regarding Tommy's successful career as a shoe shiner. Tommy is offended, telling Billy that he's been away a long time and maybe nobody went down there and told him that he doesn't shine shoes anymore. Billy becomes upset that Tommy is taking things seriously, he apologizes, Tommy apologizes, there is a pause, and then Billy says the line we all know and love.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
Tommy goes irate, having to be held back and leaving the restaurant, but coming back later and beating the ever-loving shine box out of Billy, along with Jimmy doing a bus driver impression. Jimmy, Henry, and Tommy later bury Batts, but this murder comes back to haunt the shoe shiner as he is eventually killed for this unsanctioned hit against a made man. There's many details and interesting facts regarding the Billy Batts murder, like the fact that in real life, Jimmy took over some of Batts' operations, and now that Batts was out, he wanted them back, which is why Jimmy went along with the killing. This is referenced in the film just before Tommy starts beating Billy Batts, with the latter saying to Jimmy, I came home and I want what I gotta get. I got mouths to feed. The real life Batts was also not killed on the same night he had his altercation with Tommy, instead being attacked and killed by Tommy 2 weeks later at a different club. Another interesting fact is that there may be more to Tommy's line about Billy buying his button, as research suggests that the real Billy, William Bentvenner, was Italian on his father's side but Irish on his mother's, meaning he couldn't have been made in the traditional way, but allegedly he bought his button from the underboss Frank Scalise. Who knows if this is true, as it's often difficult to verify this kind of information, but we do know that Scalise was whacked for selling memberships. Though it's alleged that Billy Batts became a made man in the early 60s, it's thought that the books were closed in 1957 and not reopened until the 70s, meaning he couldn't have been made in the 60s, leading to credence that perhaps he did buy his button from Scalise before Scalise's death in 1957. Although saying that, it is also thought that it is possible to be a made guy even if you aren't full-blooded Italian, so long as your father was Italian. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little about the two men and the altercation they had. Was Batts baiting Tommy from the get-go? Was he goading him into a reaction? Was he genuinely happy to see him but got annoyed at Tommy's attitude? And ultimately, who was at fault for their interaction? It's a superbly acted scene. You can really feel an undercurrent of resentment, especially from Tommy's side, even though we know nothing about the two's relationship. And it's kind of funny when you consider Joe Pesci and Frank Vincent were two friends who were a comedy duo, and yet they're always beating the crap out of each other in their films. Anyway, there's not a lot of people at the party. It's difficult to say whether this is into the early morning hours, so most people have gone home, or Batts is just an unpopular guy. Tommy clearly has a massively inflated ego and is deeply insecure, so I know it sounds easy to say this, but he should have been cordial and just gone up to Billy Batts when he arrived at the joint. Billy called Tommy a few times and he straight up ignored him, delaying coming over, which wouldn't have gone unnoticed. Perhaps this small act is what kick-started everything. This might sound naive, but Billy Batts sees Tommy, and with the way Frank Vincent acts, he looks genuinely impressed and endeared to see a little Tommy all grown up and doing the town. He calls him like 5 times before the "Oh, come here" kicks in. He calls him over, says he hasn't seen him in 6 years, gives him an exuberant hug, says he looks terrific. And Tommy's response is, "Watch the suit." Rewatching this scene, Tommy's a moron for the way he acted here. The man's been in the can. You think you want to make him happy maybe? Give him a hug, say "How you doing?" Make small talk and then walk away. We all do it in our daily lives with people we would otherwise not want to be around. Some people would argue different, and let me know what you think down in the comment section below, but I don't see anything in Batts' behaviour yet that suggests he was being patronising to Tommy. But Tommy's grown up now. He thinks he's accelerated in the 6 years that Batts has been away, and there's an added insecurity of Batts being someone who knew Tommy when he was younger, an ugly reminder that he wasn't always a scary gangster. There's always that threat of embarrassment when you've made it to a high station and someone comes along who knew you used to wet your bed or was scared of the dark or something. Batts picks up on it, says, "You know you're my life, don't get too big on me now." Which to me sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing to say. He's still laughing and smiling, he could have said a lot worse. And if anything, the way he responds to Tommy's line about the suit looks like he thinks Tommy is joking around, breaking balls, when of course Tommy is deadly serious and can hardly contain his rage. I know some people will say that Batts was already winding up Tommy by this point, but having rewatched the scene for this video, I really don't see it. Tommy then says, "Just don't go busting my balls, okay?" Which is a real mood killer, because busting balls is exactly what they had been doing. And so Batts says,
Tommy, if I was gonna break your balls, I'd tell you to go home and get your shine box.
Now obviously, this is an escalation. It's evidence that Batts is starting not to like what he's hearing from Tommy, so he wants to put Tommy back in his place. But it also highlights Batts' emotional intelligence, because he's basically saying, "I could have said something embarrassing, but I didn't, and now I'll remind you by saying it anyway." When he says it, everyone on Tommy's side of the table looks at Batts. They know that this won't go down well with Tommy. Billy then launches into his spit-shine Tommy monologue, and the guys he's talking to are laughing. Tommy's woman is there. Clearly, he's getting more and more agitated, and Batts is intentionally telling this story to undermine Tommy. He's come out of the can. This kid now thinks he's all that, so I'll tell the bar something they probably don't know about him. He goes on for quite a while, pushing the knife deeper and deeper. He then tops it off by raising his glass and saying, "Salut, Tommy," as if Tommy is going to reciprocate. Now, of course, we can obviously say that as Tommy shouldn't have acted the way he did when he walked in, Batts shouldn't have embarrassed Tommy with the story. But there's several things to consider. Batts is responding to Tommy's attitude. He's also probably genuinely hurt at the way Tommy has acted towards him, and his ego has been tickled by this young punk thinking he's a big shot. I'm sure no one else at the bar did the same to Billy, so he has no reason to go after them. As far as we know, Batts has no reason to be wary of Tommy's violent nature. He probably doesn't even know about it. All he knows about the kid is that he can make your shoes look like fucking mirrors. Excuse my language. I do have to give Tommy credit here. He does hold his tongue for as long as he could, which wasn't much. You have to consider it wasn't just a personal beef between him and Batts, but Tommy was being used as cannon fodder for him to entertain his friends. He's being laughed at here. And the key point, which is not yet revealed at this point in the film, is that Batts was a made guy and Tommy wasn't. The difference between the two men in mob hierarchy is night and day. Batts is practically royalty and Tommy is a peasant who Billy remembers as a shoe shiner. Tommy's behaviour, not kissing the ring and instead clapping back, was insulting to Batts, and Batts was within his right to tell his little story. Even if he wasn't, because he's a made man, Tommy was obligated to just sit still and take it. He's gotta give Billy respect, whether he likes him or not. Even Henry and Jimmy's behaviour in this scene looks kinda stilted, like they don't want to be there, but they know they have to act a certain way. Maybe even Batts notices this when he says early on, "It's a celebration, fellas," as if saying, "Why do you guys look so miserable?" The fact that Billy's got his buttons is hugely important, and Tommy again takes the wrong course of action and reprimands Billy, saying, "No more shines." Billy had even turned away as he considered the matter closed, and then says, "What?" And Tommy repeats himself. And Tommy's saying to Billy that maybe nobody went up and told him, that he's been away a long time and doesn't know that he doesn't shine shoes anymore, isn't just him putting forward his grievances. It's essentially saying to Billy, "You're an old hat, you've been out of the game, there's new dogs in town." Who is he to say this? He's a thug, a hood. If he had his buttons, you could understand it. Bats would be in the wrong and you wouldn't be able to talk to Tommy like that now. But Tommy's immaturity and emotional instability is on display for all to see here, including Billy, who chooses not to use it and instead talks to Tommy on a human level, saying, "What's got into you? I'm breaking your balls a little, that's all. I'm only kidding with you." Tommy doesn't let it go, saying, "Sometimes you don't sound like you're kidding. There's a lot of people around." Bats again explains himself and even goes as far as to say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." And then Tommy, to his credit, does something incredibly rare and also apologizes. The matter is closed. There is a pause. And then Billy says the Shinebox line. It's not clear whether Billy apologized knowing he would hit Tommy with the Shinebox line. Watching the scene, it kind of looks like Billy is making a genuine appeal to Tommy. He then takes a sip of his drink, which reminds us it's a party, he's probably a little drunk, and he looks angry while he's doing it, then says the line. Maybe it wasn't planned, he just got pissed off in the moment. And again, we can argue he shouldn't have said it. Tommy apologizes and it sounded genuine. Bats could have put a stop to it. But in many ways, he had to respond. Tommy has gotten offended and Bats has apologized to him. He's spoken to him like he's an equal, and he's not. Bats could actually lose face here if he just shuts up and does nothing. It would be as if he's scared of Tommy, that he's gone soft in prison and he has to be on eggshells and watch what he says around Tommy. There's a man's reputation at stake here. Him saying the Shinebox line is him saying, "I'll say what I want because I can. What are you going to do about it?" And it's also, of course, a very intentional, direct insult to Tommy because he's now saying the thing that he previously toyed with the idea of saying. Because we know Tommy, we know he would react the way he did. We probably wouldn't be saying, "Come on, tough guy, you feel strong?" It's risky and dumb from Bats, but only if you don't have the context that Bats is made. This can't be emphasized enough. Non-made guys are basically dirt when compared to those that have their buttons. Billy thinks he's untouchable. He is untouchable. The fact that Tommy responded to this story is out of order. The fact that he smashed his drink and insulted Billy is offensive. The fact that he went for him would require some kind of payment or payback from Bats. It's like there's two ways of looking at this scene. The way the characters should have handled it within the context of social norms, and the way they should have handled it within mob life. Bats knows he's in complete control of the situation. He tells the people around him to relax and enjoy themselves. Within the context of the film, it makes complete sense that an anxious Henry apologizes and says Tommy doesn't mean any disrespect. Bats summarizes the scene quite well, saying, "We're hugging and kissing," and then 2 minutes later he's acting like a jerk. Rather surprisingly, Jimmy doesn't just lay over for Bats. He fights Tommy's corner a bit, saying Bats insulted Tommy and he was a little out of order himself. It shows you how high Jimmy's standing is in the mob, how much respect he has in spite of him being a non-Italian, that he can talk like this to Bats, and Bats doesn't start on Jimmy, instead just saying he didn't insult anybody. Jimmy probably already knows by this point that Billy is a dead man, so he wouldn't care much about making Bats feel at ease. Even the way he says, "Okay," to Bats is like Hannibal Lecter warming up his evening dinner. It's curious that also Tommy is being held back by Henry, but not Jimmy. Maybe on some level, being as shrewd as he is, it's good for him on a personal level that Tommy goes irate against Billy, as if Billy is killed, which Jimmy might already be planning, or at least knows something is cooking because he hears Tommy say, "Keep him here." When it goes down, it gets traced back to the man who went ballistic at Billy in a bar, and he is scapegoated for it, even if he does love him, instead of anything coming back to Jimmy, which is of course what actually happens. It's remarkable that in a scene where two egotistical characters are shouting at each other, Jimmy comes across as the biggest psycho in the room. In real life, Jimmy was thought to be even more insane than Tommy, and made guys were actually afraid of him. We can later see that Jimmy is engaging Billy in conversation. He's filling him with free drinks and has him with his back faced towards the door. This is a really brilliant scene. Within the context of the universe, we can understand why Bats acted the way he did. He was offended by Tommy's attitude, and later we learn he was a made guy, feared and untouchable, the highest ranking guy in the room. Tommy says, "Keep him here," which should send red flags to Billy, but again, there's nothing Tommy can do. And for Billy to run away, it would be considered cowardice. But as an audience, we've seen the way Tommy acts in the film, and we can't fathom somebody winding him up like this and him not doing anything about it. So we know something is about to go down. Real greaseball shit. The brilliant acting and dialogue also suggests that the two characters didn't exactly get along in the past either. Perhaps Bats used to bully Tommy in the same way Tommy abuses Spider, and Tommy had to take it then. But now he thinks he doesn't have to take it anymore. Much like how his character in The Sopranos came out of the can and saw Tony Soprano as a kid, perhaps Frank Vincent's Billy had seen that Tommy was doing better, and there was a tinge of resentment and bitterness, a need to put him back in his place because he still sees him as Tommy the shoe shiner, as he couldn't handle the way Tommy had spoken back to him. The Tommy that Bats knew is not the same Tommy we see in the film. Bats' bizarre line about screwing kids like that in prison shows you just how much of a low punk he thinks Tommy is. Would Billy have talked to Tommy the way he did if he knew what kind of maniac he had become? I don't know. But even if he did, he would be within his rights to do so, in terms of mob law. I think the first time you watch the scene, you come away thinking Bats was the aggressor and in the wrong for pushing Tommy's buttons. But looking back, I think Tommy was the one in the wrong on multiple fronts. What do you think? Was Bats a fool for trying to bait Tommy and flex his power? Or should Tommy have taken the situation on the chin? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.